Hey friends, welcome back to my golden thimble. I hope you're ready for some serious cuteness because today we are sewing this adorable heart-shaped tote bag. It's the perfect little project for Valentine's Day, gift giving, or just for adding a pop of love to your everyday outfits. If you want to make your own, I've got you covered. The sewing pattern for this bag is totally free when you sign up on our website. Just fill out the subscription form and you will get access to the free PDF sewing pattern to print at home. And now, grab your fabric, thread, and let's get sewing. Let's talk materials. For this bag, I'm using an outdoor cotton canvas. I am also adding a layer of lightweight to medium fusible interfacing to the body pieces. And finally, I'm using red thread to match my fabric. Once you cut everything, you should have 4 layers of the hard body and each one should have fusible interfacing on the back and 2 rectangles for the pocket. On one of them, you should have already drawn the weld pocket space for our zipper. For this, use the pattern paper for the exact placement. And finally, we have 2 fabric strips 3 inches wide by 41 inches long. Alright, let's get sewing. First, we're adding the zipper pocket to the lining. Center your rectangle drawing on the hard lining piece. I use my paper pattern as a guide to get the exact placement, and you should do the same. Once it's centered, pin it to the fabric to keep it from shifting. Now, head over to your sewing machine and stitch all the way around the rectangle. This will create the opening for our zipper. Now comes the tricky part. Grab a pair of scissors and carefully cut along the center line of the rectangle, but don't go all the way to the edges just yet. When you are about 3/8 of an inch away from the end, take your snip scissors and cut a triangle shape at each corner, just like this. Be super careful not to cut into the stitching, otherwise you might have to start over. Now we have the opening looking like this. Take the pocket piece and turn it towards the wrong side of the fabric. Make sure to give it a good press, smoothing everything out so you will end up with a neat rectangular opening like this. Now, let's install the zipper. I am using a regular nylon zipper. Place the zipper underneath the hard opening, making sure that it are right in the center of it. Hold it in place with some pins to make sure it stays put while we sew it, and don't worry if it's longer than the opening. We will trim that extra length later. Now, take it to your machine and sew all around the opening, staying about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. A straight stitch works perfectly for this, and if you have a zipper foot, it can make things even easier. The zipper is now secure and any extra length sticking out can be trimmed off. Take your second pocket rectangle and place it right on top of the first one. Pin all around the edges of the pocket fabric, but be careful not to pin or sew through the hard fabric. We only want to sew the pocket layers together. To make sure this doesn't happen, gently move the hard fabric away before sewing around our pocket to close it. Now, sew all the way around the pocket edges with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. This will close up the pocket, making it into a nice functional zipper pouch inside of our bag. And just like that, we have a fully lined zipper pocket, perfect for keeping your small essentials safe inside your tote. Now, let's move on to finish the lining so we can move on to sewing the main body for our heart bag. Take your second lining heart piece and place it right on top of the one we just made with the right sides facing each other. Now, we are going to sew all around the edges with a 1/2 of an inch seam allowance. Start on one notch and stop at the other, leaving about 3 inches opening on one side of the heart. This opening will help us turn everything right side out later. The outer piece will be the same but without the opening. The one that, as you can see, I forgot to do on the lining, and of course had to unpick later. Trim the excess fabric at the bottom corner of the heart. This will help reduce bulk when we turn it inside out. Next, trim the seam allowance down to 1/4 of an inch and make little snips all around the curved edges. These tiny cuts will help the fabric lay flat and smooth when we turn it right side out. One important note though, don't trim the top curves of the heart just yet. We still need to sew that part together, so leave it as it is for now. Now, turn the outer fabric right side out and give it a good press. Alright, now that our back body is prepped, let's move to sewing the straps. All you have to do is fold each strap lengthwise with the right sides together and sew along the open edge using a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Now I'm using my loop turner to flip the straps right side out, but if you don't have one, you can also use a safety pin to guide the fabric through. Once both straps are turned, the only thing left to do is give them a nice press so they lie flat. Time to sew them into the bag. Take one end of your strap and pin it at the notch on the top of the heart, making sure you're only grabbing one layer of the fabric. Repeat the same thing on the other side of the bag so both straps are pinned in place. Now take it to your machine and sew the straps in place with a 1/2 of an inch seam allowance. Alright, we're almost there. Now let's attach the lining to the main fabric to bring everything together. Start by inserting the main fabric into the lining. Use your fingers to align and pin the tops of both fabrics together. I like to start at the notches, then pin the center of the heart, and finally pin the rest of the space around. Now, sew around the top edge at 1/2 of an inch seam allowance. Just be careful here not to grab any other layers of the fabric by accident. Make sure you're only stitching the lining and the outer fabric together. You are doing so great! Now let's finish this off. Take your scissors and make a snip cut right at the very center of the heart peak, being super careful not to cut into the seams. Next, we are going to trim the seam allowance around the curves, just like we did before. This makes sure the curves will turn nice and smooth. We are so close! Just a couple more steps and we are done. Take the open space in the lining and use it to pull the entire bag to the right side out. Slowly start flipping everything so both right sides of the fabric are now on the outside. Take the opening on the lining and fold the seam allowances inside, pinning it close so it matches the top of the bag nicely. Once it's all pinned, sew a straight stitch along the opening and close it up. And that's it! We have finished sewing the bag! Now all you need to do is put the lining inside the bag and give it a final good press to make sure everything looks perfect. You made it! I'm so proud of you! I am sure you did amazing and I would love to see your finished bag, so please share your final pictures with me on Facebook or Instagram. Don't forget to like this video, and if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and follow the channel for more sewing tutorials. Happy sewing!